Power rankings are always tricky, right? So anytime I post power rankings, I'm like, all right, so who knows where we're going to see a controversy this time. So I want to talk about Tampa Bay versus St. Louis and the conversation of, well, right now St. Louis, and I know they had an 8-game winning streak, and I enjoyed the winning streak, which is what we're going to get into here, and they have been rewarded on the power rankings board I'm looking at for said winning streak. However, there's been some people who aren't happy about, well, how can you put Tampa ahead of St. Louis? So I have no problem explaining this because I've always been okay with explaining it. I don't do these videos very often anymore, hardly at all, because I know it won't satisfy everybody. It can't, because there are people who are convinced I have favorites. That's why I had a high and low on the board to show that, hey, every team's high and low all year. And then I had people saying, well, if teams could just be high and low and it doesn't matter, then power rankings don't matter. Okay, so again, right? So there is no one team that I look at and I say they have to be the tops. They have to be number one. Tampa Bay had a 3-week streak at number one on that board. I'm looking 1, 2, 3, and then they fell. And where they fell was this week. They finished their 11-game winning streak at Colorado, 4-3 win, and then they lost at Vegas 5-3, and they lost at Arizona 7-3. They dropped 2 spots on the power rankings that week. Now, you can overreact. You can look at a 7-3 loss to Arizona and go, that's it, drop them to like 7th or 8th. But then you're doing what power rankings shouldn't do, and you're overreacting. Now, there are power rankings I see that underreact. I think the NHL.com ones underreact at many times. But I feel like you got to make sure it doesn't overreact. But the following week, they lost against Toronto at home 4-3. The loss to Chicago was bad. They lost 5-2, and then they beat Calgary 4-3. They still dropped 3 spots on the week, even though they were 1-2. Now, this past week, they had a loss at home against Boston, which was a really well-played game. They lost it 2-1. Really close, and Boston, of course, one of the teams near the top of the power rankings. Then they go to Montreal. They won 4-0 in a game that was just really, really well played by them. And just, a shutout's important too, because when their goaltending gets going, that's when things tend to get better. And then last night at Boston, in a fight-filled game, in a game that felt like playoffs, they beat Boston for the 3rd time in 4 meetings this year. And that 4th meeting, that loss against Boston, that was an overtime loss. So they are playing very, very well right now. They are. And this 4-game losing streak in here, I think part of that may have been fatigue that will happen with a big winning streak. Right now, Philadelphia fans are excited. That losing streak will come. And when it happens, there may be some that feel panic about it. We'll definitely have an index about that about 10 days from now. But in general, Tampa's playing really well. January, they were 10-2-1. February, 10-4. March, so far, they are 2-1. So in the calendar year of 2020, they have 22 wins, 7 regulation losses, and 1 overtime loss. So to bust them down and say, well, since they're about 500 in their last 10 games, well, they're not playing very well, it oversimplifies things a bit. There were some games in here, sure, that were poor. They have won 3 of their last 4. So I feel like they're trending in the right direction. They beat Calgary, who are in the playoffs. Boston, who are in the playoffs. Barely lose to Boston, who are obviously in the playoffs. And against Montreal, they were clearly the better team. So, yes, the Chicago and Toronto games, there were some troubling moments in that. Definitely Arizona as well. End of a long road trip and all of that. But in general, they're trending in the right direction. So, St. Louis. Talk about St. Louis here. At New Jersey, they lose 4-2. That was their most recent result. And they beat the New York Rangers 3-1. They dropped 1 spot this week because I felt Tampa played really well against Boston twice. These were the only 2 games they played between last week's power rankings and this one. Now, the week before, at home they beat Dallas, the Islanders, and Chicago. They won 4-3, 3-2, and 6-5. Prior to that, they beat Minnesota in Minnesota 4-1. So 3 1-goal victories and a 3-goal victory over Minnesota. They moved up 2 spots into that number 5 spot that they occupied last week. The week before, well, they were coming off of what had been a really rough patch where they lost a bunch of games. So it started with a loss against Nashville 1-0 or 2-1, and then the 8-game winning streak starts with a 3-0 win over New Jersey, a 1-0 win over Arizona, so back-to-back shutouts, and then they beat Dallas 5-1 in Dallas. They moved up 6 spots that week in going 3-1. So they moved up quite substantially in that 1 week, and they continue moving up. They moved up 8 spots in the power rankings in 2 weeks, which is high, considering you're moving into the top row. Now you look at their record since the new year. They were 5-4-2 in January, 8-4-2 in February, and in March so far they're 1-1. They're 14-9-4, meaning they've won 14 out of 27 games since the calendar year changed over. In 30 games, Tampa's won 22. So I feel like at this point, I have Tampa ahead of St. Louis. And again, with each day I go through and I make changes. Since last night, that Carolina-Pittsburgh game, yeah, that corrected things. There's been a change. And, day to day, that's how that goes. Every Saturday, you get a snapshot. But I feel like I have these teams in the right spot. So I wanted to explain, because I understand that for St. Louis fans that see these 8 in a row, and they see the 4 losses and 5, they go, that's it. Tampa Bay belongs below us. The 3 wins in their last 4. St. Louis had the 1 win and the 1 loss this week. I moved Tampa Bay up. I dropped St. Louis down, but St. Louis is still up 7 spots in the last 3 weeks. And for Tampa, they're down 4 in the last 3 weeks. So they have dropped. St. Louis has gone up. And trends being as they are, that would mean that Tampa could end up dropping again. But in the big picture, it's been a very good 2020 for Tampa Bay so far. And for St. Louis, they had that, and again, it was during that time where, Jay Bouwmeester goes down, and that clearly was distracting the team, and now it feels like they've come out of that. We'll see how they do this week. I see no reason at this stage for me to declare anybody a true next Stanley Cup winner, so I'm not making any declarations. I'm sticking with my preseason prediction of Washington because I don't see why not. And at the start of the playoffs, I'll change it. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I have no problem answering, and I'm willing to do that. It's one of those rare occasions where I do it. This may be the only time this season where I do it. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.